Um, so it's late here, but still awake, so I may as well make my time productive. I want to talk about an important issue, which is affirmative action or positive action as it is known in the UK. This is a controversial subject, and with good reason, because the stakes of the subject are so high and the issues are so important. Basically, summed up, affirmative action, positive action is the idea that in order to create more equality in the political system especially, there needs to be measures to ensure that more women and ethnic minority people are represented, or disabled people, or anyone else that was perceived, rightly or wrongly, to be at a disadvantage. Now, in the UK, it's known as positive action. I've just been looking up some information about this um, to get a general idea about what the situation is in this country. I've just seen a video where the Labour MP Sadiq Khan, I think it was Sadiq Khan, he was arguing that there needs to be more positive action, for example, all women shortlists. Now, it doesn't surprise me that he says that because he's a member of the Labour Party, and the Labour Party, of all major political parties, is the party most in favour of this. Um, I'll just say from the outset, my own position is that I believe it is a bad idea, and this is why. Now, I will make a disclaimer before I argue my case. If you if you're completely in favor of positive action, affirmative action, all I would ask is that you hear what I have to say. And if you still disagree with me, fair enough. But all I would ask is that you hear what I have to say. So this is it. I genuinely want to see a more diverse parliament. I think there's an assumption that if people oppose positive action, then they're somehow opposed to progress and they're somehow opposed to having a more diverse situation. I think that's a very unfair sort of evaluation of what the position is of people who oppose this. The reason I oppose positive action is not because I don't want to see more diversity. On the contrary, I believe it is actually counterproductive. Looking at Wikipedia, this is what the article sums up for those who are in opposition. And I'm reading this out because it more or less echoes a lot of the things that I would argue against. Opponents of affirmative action, such as George Sher, believe that affirmative action devalues the accomplishments of people who are chosen based on the social group to which they belong rather than their qualifications, thus rendering affirmative action counterproductive. Opponents, who sometimes say that affirmative action is reverse discrimination, further claim that affirmative action has undesirable side effects in addition to failing to achieve its goals. They argue that it hinders reconciliation, replaces old wrongs with new wrongs, undermines the achievements of minorities, and encourages individuals to identify themselves as disadvantaged, even if they are not. It may increase racial tension and benefits the more privileged people within minority groups at the expense of the least fortunate within minority groups, such as the working class white people. They claim that cases such as, well, that's going into American cases, which this video is not really about. I'm focusing here on the British situation. Well, I pretty much echo a lot of what is said there. Um, I believe that if someone is being put on a shortlist, or they're being favored solely because of their demographic and the notion that, well, we need to get more black MPs or we need to get more disabled MPs or more women MPs, therefore we're going to favor this person first. I think it is fundamentally unfair. It's not a level playing field because you're treating people like charity rather than treating them in an equal sense. It's actually rather patronizing to that social group in question because it insinuates that only through forced coercive measures can they have an equal opportunity. But the whole point here should be equal opportunity, not equal outcome. This is a very important point. Now, anyone who is open minded and progressive minded would want to see as much diversity as possible and would want as much of a 50-50 scenario as possible. But You simply cannot coerce a 50-50 situation. It's unrealistic. And in my view, it's undemocratic. Because if you're saying that we have to make up the numbers just because it looks equal, rather than because it is equal opportunity, that to me is wrong. Now, in the United Kingdom, as of 2010, apparently since that time we have had, I'm just looking at this situation here. It says again in the Wikipedia article, which granted is not the best source, but it is the most convenient source. In the UK, any discrimination, quotas, or favouritism due to sex, race, and ethnicity, among other protected characteristics, is generally illegal. For any reason in education, employment, during commercial transactions, in a private club or association, and while using public services. The Equality Act 2010 established the principles of equality and their implementation in the UK. Um, Although it further says the Sex Discrimination Act 2002 allowed the use of all women shortlists to select more women as election candidates. Now, as far as I know, the only major party that has used this on a relatively regular basis is the Labour Party. And one prominent politician to have been selected for an all women shortlist was the former Home Secretary, Jackie Smith. Now, I'm opposed to all women shortlist full stop. I think it's ridiculous, and I think it is the whole idea that you get equal opportunity for women by actually having a policy that actually discriminates against men is ridiculous. And people say, oh, but it doesn't. I've been in debates with Labour Party activists over this issue, and they've said, well, it doesn't discriminate against men. Men can still stand. But if you break it down, actually it does. Because if you have a constituency where there is an all women shortlist, let's say, for example, you are a man in an area and you have sympathies for the Labour Party. Maybe you have socialist, under, socialist philosophy. Maybe you agree with a lot of Labour Party policies, and you want to contribute to society. You see problems. You want to serve your community by standing as a prospective member of Parliament. Now, let's say you don't drive, okay, and let's say you've lived in that area your whole life and you know the area and you have strong feelings about some of the issues in that area. You're a member of your local Labour Party, and then you go for selection. And let's say you are popular with locals. Let's say you're involved in a lot of local things. But the local Labour Party turns around and says, well, I'm very sorry, but we've got an all women shortlist. We're not going to let you stand because we're only making this for women. Now, how can anyone rationally say that is an equal playing field? It's no good just telling that guy, oh, well, go to another seat 100 miles away or whatever. Say the guy doesn't drive or whatever. So, in my opinion, real fairness would be saying we'll leave this open to anyone who agrees with our basic philosophy, who we feel could be a good MP, who we feel will serve the constituents well. And it shouldn't be on a basis of whether they're male or female. So the Labour Party, this is one reason I don't endorse the Labour Party, is I think they have rank hypocrisy in this regard. And it does frustrate me because they just don't seem to realise it. That the wider public doesn't endorse this sort of mentality. I mean, the Labour Party tried this in Wales, um, and it actually resulted in a lot of resentment. I forget the constituency, but it actually ended up with local protest. And the young woman that they drafted in was replaced by a middle-aged man in the end because the locals felt that he was a better representative for them, the local Labour Party members. So when the Labour Party is talking about getting in touch with its grassroots, they need to consider that, generally speaking, from what I can see, things like this don't go down well with traditional Labour voters. And that isn't because traditional Labour voters are sexist. I don't think traditional Labour voters had any problem with women candidates, but they resent the idea that there's all women shortlists. I think there's very few members of the public actually support this because, and I think not many women support it. Now, I'm not going to throw out statistics. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe more women do support it. I don't know. But I would suspect a lot of women find it patronizing that they have to sort of be coerced into this. And that's why within, for example, the Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrat Party, they haven't went for all women shortlists because they recognize it's counterproductive. So in that regard, I would argue the Conservative Party and the Lib Dem Party, sorry, are actually more progressive than Labour when it comes to actual equality. Labour is very good at preaching about equality, but when it comes to actual equality, I would argue the Tories and the Lib Dems actually have a better philosophy. Um, and I don't like everything the Tory party stands for. Believe me, I don't. But for example, I saw an election poster from the 1980s, and it was quite clever. What it said was the Conservative Party, and they showed a black guy in a suit. It said the Labour Party sees him as British. No, the Labour Party sees him as black. The Conservative Party sees him as British. Now, the issue there is that from their point of view, they aren't looking at the colour of his skin, they're looking at him as a citizen. Whereas the Labour Party focuses on the fact that someone is a minority or a woman. They seem to care more about that than someone's ability as a parliamentarian. And the irony about this is actually they have some very capable women MPs, but those women are capable because they're good parliamentarians. They serve their constituents well. It's got nothing to do with the fact that they're women. And I do take issue with the feminist argument that someone is better simply because they're a woman. I don't care if that's politically incorrect, because to me, it is blatantly on-egalitarian. It's not an egalitarian outlook. If you're saying that someone is going to be a better MP solely because they're a woman or from an ethnic minority, that's ridiculous. You could have a 50-year-old man who has more progressive attitudes than a 30-year-old woman. I mean, if we're talking about progressive ideas, you could have a 50-year-old white guy who opposes the death penalty. You could have a 30-year-old young Asian woman who is for it. The point I'm making is what the social group that someone belongs to should not be used as a way to judge their performance as a parliamentarian. That whole idea is ridiculous. I want to see more diversity in Parliament. I just don't think that quotas is the way to do it. So I'm not sure how it says in Wikipedia there that, for example, it says that 2010 equality legislation, just looking this again, yeah, the Equality Act 2010 um, encompassed, it sort of allowed the use of all women shortlists. Well, to me, that's hypocritical and it needs to be reviewed if that's the case. Um, oh, well, hypocritical is the wrong word. I should say contradictory, because it says in the UK any discrimination, quotas, or favoritism due to sex, race, and ethnicity is generally illegal, and yet somehow all women shortlists are legal. Now, the point Mr. Khan was making was that with the current situation, it's going to take 100 years before you have a 50-50 situation. I disagree. Actually, I think we're going to get that sooner, because this election was positive, and when we've now got more women MPs than ever before, and more ethnic minorities than ever before. 191 women, 459 men, 42 ethnic minorities, 590 white MPs. But one thing about the racial aspect is the simple fact of the matter is most of the population is white. So if we're talking about reflecting society, that does reflect society actually. Now, granted, with the gender issue, that isn't as reflective, because if we look at the population, there's actually marginally more women than men. Okay, that's still not reflective. 198 women to what was it, 459 men. So it's not an equal situation. But that doesn't mean there isn't equal opportunity. I mean, I don't know of any law or anything in the selection process that actually says you can't stand because you're a woman. And I would suspect that any political party that turned around and said to someone who wanted to join the party, oh no, we're not going to let you stand because you're a woman, they would immediately be in the headlines. and they will probably be sued legally for discrimination. So let's just look at the facts here. There is actually no discrimination against women. There is nothing legally stopping women from standing. But all women shortlists actually do prevent men from standing in that particular seat. You can't argue against this. It's a basic fact. Now, some people scoff at the idea of reverse discrimination. I disagree. I believe that discrimination is discrimination is discrimination. Simple as that. Um, so, what's the answer? Well, I would be in favour of methods that would encourage more women to stand. I would be in favour of methods that encourage more ethnic minorities to put their name forward. And a lot of different things could be done. Um, so, on reflection, maybe Harriet Harman's pink bus idea wasn't necessarily a bad thing if it encourages more women to get involved in politics. However, the premise of the Labour Party that we should have all women shortlists, I just fundamentally disagree with it. And I'll be looking closely at what the Labour candidates in the leadership race, what their stance on this is. At the moment, there's Andy Burnham, Yvette Cooper, Mary Cray, Liz Kendall, Chuka Umunna, of course, is withdrawn. Um, I don't know much about Mary Cray, but I know on Question Time she came across as a bit of a feminist. That's fine. She's a right to be. But I've made my views on third wave feminism quite clear. I believe that third wave feminism is not egalitarian, and so I will be looking at their positions very closely. Why? Because one of these people could be our next prime minister. So it does matter. There will be those who say that positive action is the only way to get an equal situation, but I would argue it isn't actually an equal situation. If you have a 50-50 situation that's brought about by just sort of treating people like charity and saying you can get this. I mean, put it this way. Imagine you have two people applying for a job, right? And imagine that the guy has a lot more experience, right? Let's just use this as a scenario. Let's say it's working in a nuclear bunker. Now, let's say the guy has had 15 years working in another nuclear bunker. Let's say the woman has had 5 months researching it online. Now, who would you argue as the employer has more field experience? The guy, right? Okay, maybe it's not the best example, but you get the point I'm trying to make here, which is basically that the best person for the job should be the best person qualified for the job. And a job, like being a member of parliament, is no trivial matter. So this is not about gender. I believe there are many very strong, good women MPs out there, and I believe there's many women in society that would make much better candidates than some men. But the difference between me and feminists is that I believe that individuals are individuals. They're not determined by what gender they are. Now, feminists believe that someone is good solely because they're female. And I just fundamentally disagree with that position. And there's something ironic about the Labour Party. You know, what was the first political party that had a woman MP? The Conservatives. What was the first political party that had a woman Prime Minister? The Conservatives. So, you know, Labour can preach about this, but they must look at those facts and wonder, well, is there something that we're doing wrong? I don't know if Labour has more women MPs than the other parties. Of course, now the Liberal Democrats have no women MPs, which I think is unfortunate. You know, the issue here is not that I have anything against more women and more ethnic minority people in Parliament. In fact, I want more. I just disagree with the premise that it should be through coercion or through just making up these quotas to make it look good. If there are people interested in politics, then they should be encouraged to stand. I wouldn't criticize any political party for trying to encourage um, women or ethnic minorities to stand for their prospective parties. I have no problem with that. But I would have a problem with quotas, and I would have a problem with saying that this person can stand solely because they represent the demographic that there needs to be more representation of, and using that as a way to discriminate against a white guy. I mean, I'm interested in politics. I care about my community. If I wanted to stand, and the local party of whichever political party I joined said, "Oh, sorry, you're a nice guy. I can see that you care about your community, but we're not going to let you stand because this is an all-women shortlist." Frankly, I resented. I think, well, wait a second. What about my rights? What about my rights as a British citizen to take part in the democratic process? And I would think, well, wait a second. Why is it that women are being treated like they are not being given the same opportunity when actually they've got exactly the same opportunity? And if it was a case that a woman got the position, but it was through a fair method, i.e., we're both interviewed and they thought she was better for the job, I'd wish her the best of luck. I'd think, great, okay, I'd be disappointed, but so long as it was done in a fair way, I wouldn't hold it against her. However, if it was on a premise of being in a shortlist, then I would take issue with that. So, you don't have to agree with me on this, but all I'm saying is look at the premise of this, because actually it is not about equality. It is about an image of equality. But real egalitarianism must be about equal opportunity, not about an equal image of egalitarianism. So let me know your thoughts on this. Just to be absolutely clear, my issue here is not about an old boys club and just wanting to see white guys in parliament. Nothing of the sort. Again, I cannot emphasize enough. I want to see a more diverse parliament, but I want it to be done fairly and I want it to be done on a level playing field. That means everybody has the same chance. It doesn't mean giving some people a privileged status simply because they fit into a certain demographic. That's ridiculous. It patronizes them, it's undemocratic, and it also, in my view, insults the electorate because it's like saying, well, you have to vote from these people. That maybe the electorate prefers someone else, but they're not being given that choice because that person has been excluded because they're not a woman. You know, that's all I'm saying. It should be equal opportunity, not an image of egalitarianism. Let me know your thoughts.